Are there gospels found more recently, like Thomas or the others, that you find helpful to understanding the context of Jesus' life, ministry, and the kingdom of God? The short answer is no, but I do find them really interesting. And they're not, for the most part, recently. We found the other gospels that you'll hear about 100 years ago. Actually, it was during World War II, so 80 years ago. But we knew about many of them all along. The Gospel of Thomas is mentioned. We've known about the Gospel of Thomas always. All the early church leaders write about it, quote from it, but it had been lost, and we didn't have a copy of it. And they found a copy of it in the 1940s in Egypt, along with a number of these others. I've written a good bit about them if you want it. Somebody's really interested in them, but they might turn out, the more you learn about them, you might be less interested in them than you think they are, because they're not nearly as much fun as Da Vinci Code makes them sound or something. There's not a word in any of them about Jesus and Mary Magdalene, having a relationship with each other. That's just not there. There's not, they're pretty boring, actually. but I don't want to put people off. People will say, "Oh, I want to read all those Gospels that didn't make the New Testament." And the reason they didn't make the New Testament wasn't because the church found them too controversial or whatever. They were written. The New Testament was already together before they were written. They were probably all written in the late 2nd or 3rd or 4th centuries, 100 years after the 4 Gospels we have in the New Testament. The possible exception is the Gospel of Thomas, which is not a gospel in that it doesn't have any stories. There's not a single story about Jesus. It's sayings of Jesus, things that Jesus said. Where somebody in Egypt had a list of things Jesus said. Most scholars think it was also sometime in like the middle of the 2nd century, or 75 to 100 years after the New Testament Gospels were written. But a few scholars, and they've been prominent, thought that it was actually written around the same time as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which makes it even more intriguing. Nobody thinks it was written by Thomas, the disciple of Jesus. Nobody thinks that. So, written by somebody in Egypt who collected sayings of Jesus, and about 1/3 of them are found in our New Testament Gospels, but about 2/3 of them are not found in our New Testament Gospels. And of those, a handful are kind of interesting because they actually sound Jesus-y. They sound like the kinds of things Jesus might have said. Here's an example. Parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a woman who buys cornmeal at the market. She fills her bag with cornmeal, but the bag has a hole in it. And as she walks home, the meal drips out of the bag and onto the road. When she gets to her home, she discovers the bag is empty. So what does it mean? And how is the kingdom of heaven like that? I have no idea. But it actually sounds kind of like a Jesus parable. I can imagine Jesus might have actually told that parable. But he probably would have told it. It would help to know to whom did he tell it and why. And I mean, as it is, you just kind of go, oh, yeah, maybe Jesus said that. I have no idea what it means, but that might be kind of, so that's interesting. But a good deal of stuff in the Gospel of Thomas is just kind of bizarre, and you don't even know what. I mean, it's not controversial. It's just not. You don't even know what it means. And it seems to be more Egyptian than Jewish. Like the guy writing it must have been picking up on things that somebody other than Jesus had said, and adding them to his list because he liked them for some reason. Anyway, so the question was, do I find those other Gospels helpful for understanding Jesus' life and ministry and all? I don't. I actually find them kind of interesting. Reading these ancient books. The ones I find most interesting of all are the ones that have stories about Jesus as a super baby. And those are the later ones. Those are like in the 4th century. So, and what it was, we don't even know how seriously anybody took these. They might have been just novels. There was one of my mother's favorite books in the 1960s. She was a national leader, by the way, in the ALCW, American Lutheran Church Women. And my mother, Norma Powell, was one of the national leaders. She loved a book by Marjorie Holmes called Two from Galilee.
Yep.
It was on the bestseller list, and it was the love story of Joseph and Mary, and how it was a novel, how Joseph and Mary met and how things they had to overcome, and some people who know it's a best-selling novel, and a lot of people found it inspiring and loved the book. And I remember hearing some pastor grouse about it because there were people in their church that didn't even know what they didn't remember what was in the Bible and what was in Marjorie Holmes. Well, that may have been in the 4th century. There were people who wrote 2 or 3 gospels about Jesus as a little boy. They were all stories about Jesus as a little boy and all the magical, miraculous things he did. So they're out. Joseph is cutting the board in the carpenter shop, and he accidentally cuts the board too short. And little Jesus, who's like 4 years old, comes over and grabs the board and pulls it and stretches it to the right length. And there's stories that don't have there's no meaning to them at all. They're just kind of these dumb stories. And Jesus and a neighbor boy were making little pigeons out of mud pigeons, and after Jesus makes all his mud pigeons, he waves his hands over them and they come to life and fly away. Stories. When you read these, you think, well, did anybody really believe those things happened? Or were they just reading them was it just kind of fun books? Were they just novels? And we know almost nothing. We have no evidence at all that anybody at any point ever in history thought that they were scripture, or that they should be read in the church, or thought they should be included in the Bible. The Bible had long since come together, 200-300 years before they were written. We do have a few references to bishops grumbling about them and saying that people don't know what people keep confusing these stories with stories that are in the Bible or something. They're interesting. They're kind of fun. They'd actually help me understand Jesus' life or ministry any better. And I think it would be really cool if Jesus did have a girlfriend. I mean, that wouldn't bother me at least. But, unfortunately, there's zero evidence of it. Other than let your imagination run. Let me see what else I've got. What is your understanding of the difference between Matthew 5:3, blessed are the poor in spirit, and Luke 6:20, blessed are the poor? I like that. I wrote a book on it. I wrote a book on the Beatitudes. Jesus would have spoken Aramaic, and the Aramaic word would have been anavim, and Luke translated the word anavim, poor, and Matthew translated the word anavim, poor in spirit. Either is possible, but they have slightly different meaning. What some folks don't get is neither one is a virtue. Both are unfortunate. It's not a good thing to be poor, and it's not a good thing to be poor in spirit. So I have heard people talking about blessed are the poor in spirit. Is that being poor in spirit means to be humble and to not put yourself first, to not be selfish, no. Poor in spirit means to be despondent, depressed, on the verge of giving up. It means spiritually poor. To be. I heard a pastor preaching one time, I hate to tell stories like this because then pastors are afraid to preach and my presence are afraid they'll end up being an anecdote somewhere. But I heard a pastor preaching one time this thing. So the poor in spirit. Luke talks about the poor, who are Matthew talks about the poor in spirit, were people who were physically poor. They didn't have much money, but their faith and trust in God was great. They trusted in God in spite of the fact that they were so poor. And I think you would call those people rich in spirit. They're poor, materially poor, spiritually rich. That's not what he says. He says they're spiritually poor. That doesn't sound like people who have strong faith and trust in God. That sounds like people who probably don't trust God anymore, because what good has it done? They're on the verge of giving up. That's the poor in spirit. So does Jesus bless the people who are materially, economically poor, or does he bless the people who are despondent, distressed, downcast? And well, both. One in Luke, one in Matthew. And what he has in either case is he's blessing the disadvantaged and marginalized people in the world, and that's consistent throughout those beatitudes. I can just go on and on talking about the beatitudes. Actually, it's one of my favorite topics. One of my favorite Bible verses when I was a teenager was when Jesus said, Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And I thought, well, that's people who earnestly desire to be righteous. And as a teenage Christian, I thought, I think that's me, because I want to be a good person. I want to be righteous, but no matter how hard I try, I don't seem to be able to get there. So here in this beatitude, Jesus doesn't say, blessed are the people who are righteous, but blessed are the people who really want to be righteous. So that was one of my favorite Bible verses until I got older and studied the Bible and found out that's not what it means at all. So that is no doubt true. It's just not what the verse means. What it means, Jesus could have said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst to be righteous. He didn't. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for the world to be a righteous and just place. Blessed are those people who are, I say now, who are starved for justice. Blessed are those people who live their lives yearning for the world to be the way it ought to be, because their lives in this world are so, they suffer from the world not being the way it ought to be. It fits with what you said before, the people who are poor, marginalized, depressed, shut out, the lepers, the tax collectors and prostitutes, you go on, you just go through the Gospels and see the people that Jesus keeps identifying with, the people who the people of the world is not fair to.